Hey everyone, it's Dr. Alford. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to show you some secrets to making professional embroidery projects. I have some tips and tricks to make your project come out looking beautiful. So stay tuned. Hello everyone, it's Dr. Alford. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to show you and give you some tips and secrets about making your embroidery look more professional. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to talk to you about today is a book. I know I normally don't talk about books in my videos, but I think this is really helpful if you can kind of see that. This book is by Singer, The Complete Photo Guide to Sewing by Nancy Langdon. This is the third edition, and the reason why I am recommending this book is because it has a lot of useful information, whether you are a beginner sewer or a seasoned sewer. This gives some tips and tricks and different things about measuring and fabrics, and why I think you need to have this book. They're not paying me to say anything about this book, but I think it gives some really good basic guidelines about fabrics and what they're used for, how to sew with them, knit fabrics, corduroys, classic fabrics and textures, loose weaves. And the one thing I want to talk to you today about, which is the first thing of being able to make a professional look embroidered type of item, would be to use interfacing. Now, what is interfacing? In this book, it tells you a little bit about all the different kinds of interfacings that are available. And I'm going to go through that really quick with you here in just a second. But what it is, it's a stabilizer. So when you're working with fabrics, it will help you determine, based on the type of fabric it is, what kind of interfacing works best with that fabric. So for instance, a heavy interfacing would go with a heavy fabric because you want to stabilize it. So first of all, let's talk about that. You can get it by the yard, you can get it in sheets, you can get it in rolls. So the first one I want to show you really quick. This is a non-woven material. It doesn't stretch going in any direction on the bias or anything like that. And this one does not have any sticky stuff on it. And I do recommend that for embroidery, because what happens that I have found, if I'm doing a lot of embroidery and it has that adhesive on the back, it could gum up your needle and you have to switch out your needle a little more frequently. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, this is an example. I don't know if you can kind of see, it's kind of got a shiny look to one side. That is the glue side, meaning you would put that on the wrong side. Now I have different kinds, different weights or thicknesses of interfacing. Pellon is probably your most well-known, at least here in the United States. This one also it's a little bit lighter weight. It also has an adhesive on the back. Now that doesn't mean you have to use adhesive. If you have it and you don't want to fuse it to your fabric, that's fine too. Once you heat it up, it gets a little gummy and sticky. So this is useful for all different kinds of sewing. I do a lot of apparel sewing, so that's why I have a variety of different kinds, just kind of really laying around because I have lots of it. And you can also get it in a dark gray. So it comes in different colors. Usually it's the gray, black, or a white. And it comes in sheets, it comes in rolls, and there's lots of different things that are out there for you. And in that book that I recommend, it will also tell you about the different types that are available. Another one is a water soluble. Now, I highly recommend this when you're using it for like a lightweight material like a sheer, or if you're trying to embroider on like tulle or something, like you're trying to create lace. I am going to do a video on how to make lace shortly. I'm still working on it. But this is one of those ones that once you use it, you use a water soluble and it comes off once water hits it, so it dissolves. This is great again, when you're using like sheer fabric. So that book will go into more detail about the different kinds of interfacing that's available. So that's your first thing that you need to consider when you're embroidering. Based on the type of fabric that you're using, like this is a canvas, meaning it's a heavier fabric. I think this is a 10 ounce weight, 10 or 12 ounce weight canvas. So if you were making a bag or something like that, you would still want to use an interfacing, in which I've created this interfacing. I've ironed my fabric so it's smooth, and I've pulled it nice and taut, or tight if you want to say that, in my hoop, and it goes beyond that, so I know where to, I would have measured where the center is and where I'm going to place my lettering or my motif of whatever I'm embroidering. So I'm using a little bit heavier stabilizer or interfacing for this particular project. If you have a lightweight fabric, you'd use a lightweight interfacing. Now, with different kinds of fabrics, again, whether you're using silk, this is a woven silk, this is a Duponi or Duponi, whichever you want to pronounce it. And I wanted to show you this because this is really pretty. This has different colored threads. So with any kind of fabric, especially a woven fabric, you're still going to have some give to it, and that's why you want to use an interfacing with it. And as you can see, there's a pink little ridge here. I don't know if y'all can see that or not, right up here. So my warp threads, meaning my threads going up and down, are pink, and my weft, W-E-F-T threads go across. Those are what's woven into the pink to give that pretty iridescent. I figured I'd show you this to give you an idea of how they create different things. But this is a lightweight material, therefore I would use a lightweight interfacing. You don't want to use something really heavy, especially on a fine fabric like this, meaning an expensive fabric, because what'll happen is it'll pucker and make all sorts of gaps and those kind of things if you use a heavier interfacing. So you'll have to test it out what works best for your project. I'm going to put some links in the bottom to give you the different kinds. You can even get like squares of interfacing. I use the squares a lot when I'm doing like making bibs and those kind of things, because I don't need a whole lot and it's easy to cut down. You can get them in sheets, or you can get it by the roll or by the yard. So I will put some links down below for that information. Now, the next thing we want to talk about in this video of making a professional looking embroidery are going to be your threads. Threads come in different forms. There's different brands out there. The ones I'm going to show you today are the ones I use probably the most. I got a kit that came in a box. I think there was like 60 different colors in there. This is a polyester embroidery thread. I think it's by Brother. There's also another brand out there that's on Amazon. I'll put the links in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this video, click the like button. If you want to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos, feel free to do that as well. Leave comments if you have any questions. So moving on, your embroidery threads are going to be a little bit shiny. They're going to be thin. They are also going to be, most of them are made out of polyester. And even though your regular sewing all-purpose thread isn't a polyester, it has a different look and it's made different. You would never want to use an embroidery thread or this shiny thread as a sewing thread, because it's not going to hold up as far as holding seams together for long periods of time and wash after wash. Embroidery, it's fine, but not for regular sewing. So, and if you're doing a lot of embroidery, you can also buy, if you're doing a specific color, say black, if you know you're going to use a lot of black, you might want to get a larger spool because you'll run out of it pretty quickly. This is by Coats & Clark. This is a great embroidery thread. I haven't had any breakage or problems with that. And usually if you buy an inexpensive no-name brand, a lot of times you're going to need to test it out. If you start getting breaks, meaning it breaks in the middle while you're embroidering, it may mean that it's not a quality piece. This is Gutermann. Gutermann also makes a terrific embroidery thread. You can get it in the bigger spools. This is, I believe, Madeira. This is a good thread as well. When I first started embroidering, I got a whole set of these. That's why they're a smaller spool, but this really won't last a lot if you're doing a lot of embroidery. And the shiny is really pretty for embroidery because it shows up a little better. But embroidery thread. Now the next thing I want to talk to you about, which is the third thing that's important to keep in mind when you're embroidering, is selecting the right kind of needles. They actually make an embroidery needle. Inspira makes one, Schmitz, I think there's a bunch of other brands out there, Singer. They all have the embroidery types of needles that are out there. So keep that in mind. And again, these are done by size, meaning, okay, just like the thickness of your interfacing will also have something to do with your type of needle that you use. So if you have a heavy fabric, use a heavier interfacing. If you have heavy fabric, you're going to use a larger needle. So for instance, in this packet for embroidery thread, it's got size 11 or size 75 or 90 or size 14. It depends on if it's metric or English. And the 14 would be for the heavier fabric. It's going to make a little bit larger hole. The 11s are going to be for your lighter weight fabrics, like your cottons, your silks, and those kind of things. In the book that I recommended, it talks about that as well, using the correct size needles. It's no different with embroidery. Just quickly, they make all sorts of different kinds of needles for all different kinds of projects. So if you stretch needles, for instance, have a ball point so it doesn't tear the fabric. The metallics are made a certain way so it carries the metallic thread better. You can buy leather needles for your machine. You can buy heavy jean needles for your machine. So this is a size 14, 16, and 18, depending upon how heavy a weight of material that you're actually sewing on. These are not embroidery needles, but this would be used for sewing. So just be aware that there's different types of tools to help you make that embroidery look better, look more professional. If you're using all the right types of materials in your project, it's going to have a better outcome in the end. So for instance, I'm going to show you this really quick. We're going to move on. Turn my camera around here so you can see what's going on. And in this one, I have set up my hoop, as you can see, and I told you this is a canvas, which is a little bit heavier fabric, and I've got a heavier needle. Now, I've heard recommendations that for every project you want to change your needle out. Now you're going to have to gauge that. When I'm doing baby bibs for like gifts or whatever, if I'm doing a whole bunch of them, I don't have to change it out every time I change my bib. So if you do a lot of embroidery, you'll start to hear it has like a little click to it when the needle enters the fabric. If it starts becoming dull, it'll just sound a little different. And once you start sewing, you'll know what I'm talking about. I can't give you an example right now because I do change out my needles pretty frequently when I'm doing projects. So I've selected my hoop size. I've got my proper foot on here. For my Husqvarna Viking, I've got the Q foot. I bought the special foot that doesn't come with the machine, but it's just it's more springy. I found that this works better. Now for my threads, I've got the Gutermann embroidery thread on the top, and in the bottom I'm using this is white, and then a white either bobbin thread or a white polyester thread. It needs to be basically about the same weight to give you the right effect. And you don't want to use a different color in the back, in my opinion, when you're embroidering, because if you have any stitches that kind of pull through from the back side, you'll see that color on the front side. So keep in mind you want to try to keep the same color of thread. And once you're ready to do an embroidery on your machine, if you're using your USB where you've transferred information to your flash drive and goes in your machine, or if you're selecting off of that machine, just follow the manufacturer's guidelines as far as getting everything set up. And I hope this is helpful. And this also applies if you're using a regular sewing machine, like you're using a satin stitch to do some embroidery, that's fine too. These same tips are also useful for that as well. So keep all of these in mind. So you want to think about your interfacing. You want to think about what kind of fabric that you're using when you're embroidering. You want to make sure you're using the appropriate thread and the appropriate embroidery needle when you're embroidering on your machine. So hope you found this useful and helpful. If you have questions, feel free to leave them below. Again, if you haven't subscribed to this channel and don't want to miss any upcoming videos, feel free to hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy this video, hit the like button, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining me today.